BLTs are my favorite sandwich. This is a pretty good version of a BLT. This will be better when the tomatoes are better. But this is really excellent bacon.
Hey everyone, this is Kenji. Today I'm going to be making my friend Deb Perlman's grilled BLTs. So these are, I'm going to pretend it's BLT season because it's not quite BLT season yet. And by BLT season I mean tomato season, because, well, I believe, and I've said this before, but I believe that a BLT is just a tomato sandwich that's seasoned with good bacon. All right, so I've got a grill going here. I've got about a half chimney worth of charcoal that I'm going to set up over half of the grill here. So not super, super hot, but just sort of moderate heat. Okay, and then I'm going to get my grate on there, and we'll let this preheat as well. So this is bacon from, someone brought it to me. I had a book signing the other day at the Book Larder, and the chef at a restaurant here called Skylark in Seattle, they make their own bacon, and he brought me some of this bacon, so I figured this might be a good way to do it. Now, when you're cooking bacon over a grill, obviously you're going to run into some problems because, well, bacon is very fatty and it tends to, that one looks a little thin, and it tends to drip down. And what's going to happen is that as it drips down, that fat is going to land on the hot coals, is going to ignite, and you're going to get flare-ups. And so that's a problem that you kind of have to deal with whenever you're working with anything really fatty on a grill, and it's going to be sort of extra trouble with this bacon. So managing our heat and managing sort of the position of the bacon is going to be really important to making sure that this comes out right. So as far as managing heat goes, by the way, when you're working on a charcoal grill, you manage your heat mainly by moving things around or by altering the oxygen supply. So, you know, the elements you need for fire, if you remember like your, you know, maybe your second or third grade science class, the elements you need for fire are fuel, oxygen, and heat. You can't really control the heat really here very much. You can control the fuel source and you can control the oxygen source. On a grill like this, you're mainly going to be controlling the oxygen source. So you see, as soon as I lifted up that cover, that's when the flare-ups sort of start to happen, you know, because you're getting oxygen back in there. And so oftentimes the best way to manage your heat is just to sort of, instead of trying to manage the actual way the coal is burning, instead just manage the position of your bacon. So you can rotate your thing around like this. You can feel free to, you know, move your bacon around back and forth from spot to spot. If you have a grill that like where the grate slides really easily, yeah, slides like that, you know, you can kind of do one of those. And that's why it's important to have this sort of two-zone fire here. It lets you really manage the heat. And if it starts to flare up like this, give it a little quick spin around. All right, so our goal here is to render it nice and crisp, but not let it sort of get charred, or, well, a little char is okay, but not let it get sort of blackened or burnt. With a gas grill, with a charcoal grill, when you put the lid on it, you are going to effectively reduce the amount of oxygen in there, which is going to reduce the heat, lower the flame and reduce the heat. So putting the lid on especially with the vents closed on a charcoal grill, will reduce the heat. On a gas grill, on the other hand, gas grills are designed to always vent well no matter what. Even when the lid is closed, because what they don't want to happen is they don't want uncombusted gas to just build up inside there. So gas grills, even when you close the lid, they still vent. So on a gas grill, closing the lid will actually make them hotter, whereas on a charcoal grill, closing the lid makes them cooler. So it's just one of these things you kind of got to get used to, depending on the type of equipment you have. All right, and as that bacon finishes up, I'm also going to start to toast my bread a little bit. I got this sliced sourdough here. So this is Deb Perlman's recipe. We're going to be talking about this recipe on our podcast, which is called The Recipe. She's going to be making my recipe for grilled cheese, for BLTs, and I'm making hers, and we're going to talk about them. Mine is sort of a much more classic one, as opposed to this grilled version that she has. I don't think it's part of the recipe. In fact, I didn't see it in there, but I'm just kind of soaking up some of that extra bacon fat with my bread, just because I feel like I don't want it to drip in there and go to waste and start a flare up, and you might as well capture that flavor if you can. You know? Also, I don't want my BLT on dry bread, you know. All right, we're looking good. I think this middle piece here is just about done. That guy too. Deb says that toasting the bread should take about 30 seconds per side. I think it might end up taking a little bit longer. We'll see. My fire is a little bit cooler. And I suppose it really depends, I guess, what texture you're going for in that bread. If you toast your bread and it only takes you 30 seconds per side, you're going to get like a really sort of crusty char on the outside, but have it be really sort of barely heated through, I think, in the middle. Whereas if you let them go for a little bit longer, you would get a sort of more dry crunch on the outside, but a sort of softer center. So I guess it's really a question of what you want. This is looking pretty good to me, that color there. So tomato season, you know, as it gets closer and closer to the end of the summer, your tomatoes are going to get more and more local because they, you know, the issue with tomatoes is that in order to stand up to shipping, they have to be picked unripe. And so when you're not in tomato season, the tomatoes you're getting are coming from further away. Typically, they're coming from a hothouse. Maybe they're coming from a hothouse in Canada. Maybe they're being grown down in Mexico. They're being picked green, and then they're being shipped green and then ripened sort of en route. Ripened in quotes en route, you know, allowed to sort of turn red en route. And that's why they don't really, you know, off-season tomatoes typically don't have a lot of flavor. But, you know, as you get into tomato season, we're starting to get tomatoes from a little bit closer. Pretty soon we'll have some tomatoes from well, maybe even my literal backyard. But when it's not the height of tomato season and you can't get really great tomatoes at the farmer's market, a general rule of thumb to follow with tomatoes is that the smaller they are, typically the better flavor they're going to have on the off season. And the reason for that is because of, well, if you've ever watched this channel, you know I'm a fan of the square cube law. But it's because of the square cube law, which is that as tomatoes get bigger, you know, their volume goes up in 3 dimensions, but their surface area only goes up in 2 dimensions, or their footprint only goes up in 2 dimensions. And so they become increasingly unable to support their own weight the larger in scale they get. And so when you have a big, fat beefsteak tomato, when it's really ripe, it can barely support itself under its own weight, and so you can't really ship it. And so smaller tomatoes can be picked riper, shipped more easily because they can support themselves. And so typically when you're in the off-season, if you want a decent tomato, look for smaller tomatoes, so something like a cherry tomato, or, you know, like these little, they call them like, I don't know, Campari. I think it's just a brand name, you know, the Campari tomatoes, but those generally come out pretty decently. I am hoping by the time you watch this video that you know, maybe you will be in tomato season wherever you are, or you can wait a week or two until you're in tomato season. All right. So Debs Recipe suggests mixing together mayo and sriracha. I don't have sriracha at home. I'm not a big fan of it, but I do have this you know, the samba Oelek. It's maybe the same company, but the Haifeng company. But so instead of mixing it together, I'm just going to mix it straight on the bread. I got Kewpie mayo. Got a little of the chili. All right. Now, Deb suggests that you layer the sandwiches with lettuce on the outside and bacon on the outside and tomato in the middle. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Let me dump out my lettuce water. If I was buying lettuce from the supermarket, I would probably go with something like a iceberg, like a shredded iceberg, or I might go with a romaine. This is just some romaine, like baby romaine and red leaf lettuce that came from my garden. So it's a little bit more sort of young and tender than I would typically like for a BLT, because I prefer to have my lettuce really crunchy for a BLT, but I think if we stack enough of it, it'll work. All right. All right, so this is the part where I'm not quite sure I agree with Deb. We'll find out, but she wants me to take my tomatoes, slice them. That part's okay, slice them thick. And then she wants me to put them in between the bacon and the lettuce. For me, personally, I find that it's pretty important on any sandwich where there is mayo and tomato. I find it to be pretty important that there's direct mayo and tomato contact, because I like that kind of that tomato layer, that part where the juices of the tomato kind of mingle in with the mayo. But you know, this is Deb's sandwich, so we'll do it Deb's way. Oh, the other part I need to do, whether it's in the recipe or not. Yeah, I think it's always important. Whenever you put tomatoes in something, raw tomatoes, like whether it's a salad or whatever it is, they always need to be seasoned. It kind of makes the tomato taste more like a tomato. All right, how's that look? It's a pretty good looking BLT, I'd say. Some good bacon. All right, I'm gonna cut into triangles.
Are the triangles authentic to Deb's recipe?
That's a good question. Deb would probably suggest cutting this into rectangles. I think that looks pretty good as like this though.
BLTs are my favorite sandwich. This is a pretty good version of a BLT. This will be better when the tomatoes are better. But this is really excellent bacon. I like the idea of a grilled BLT. I'm not sure. No comments. It is what it is. It tastes like what it sounds like. All the ingredients are grilled. A little bit of smokiness to it. Not much though, because it doesn't spend too much time on the fire. And then the rest is just, you know, standard BLT. You get some decent tomatoes. I like them nice and thick and juicy like this. I like my BLT to be like, you know, like a 5 napkin drippy mess. Good. I hope you listened to the podcast episode. Dev and I are going to have a lot of thoughts about BLTs and about sandwiches in general. It's called The Recipe with Kenji and Deb. You can find it wherever you get podcasts. If you want this recipe, this exact recipe, check the description below. I'll show you where you can find it. Until next time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, I will see you. Bye.
I'll get some shots.